Okay, today we're going to be talking about the SVT-40. Now, what that stands for in Russian, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce it because all the words are about the same length as a cat's leg. But SV, in translation, is self-loading rifle. The T is for Totorkov. 40, made in 1940. In 1938, they made the SVT-38, and at a distance, you could not tell the difference between the two rifles. It did have some problems, mostly mechanical, which then they altered and made the 1940 edition. Now, the problem was the Russians, who are notoriously simplistic in all their weaponry, came across the idea of gas operation instead of a bolt action or a spring release on it. So they were breaking new ground. In fact, the concept of the entire thing was so good that the Russians took that idea and in 1943 designed semi-automatic rifles that were gas operated and in fact were so efficient that they became known as Hitler's buzzsaw. Incredible rate of cycle fire, their machine guns. Now, with the 40, they were only made for 1 year. And in 1940, they made approximately 1,700,000 of them out of the Tula armories, produced by Totorkov Manufacturing. After 1943, they were basically taken out of service because they became so unreliable. The only thing that made them truly unreliable was the fact that they spent no time in training with them. The average lifespan of a Russian soldier during the Second World War, from the time they said, "Hey, you're coming with us," to the time that they were dead, was 30 days. They spent virtually no time on training, and they didn't clean their rifle. They were never instructed properly, if at all, on how to take them apart. And that's where, being a gas-operated, semi-automatic firing, that's where the problems came in. One of the things that they did change, with as opposed to the Mosin-Nagant 9130, was instead of unscrewing the cleaning rod, what they did is you simply pushed a button and it extracted. So without the lock in place, you always stood the chance of losing your cleaning rod, which was also used for barrel obstruction cleaning. This could not be lost. They came with a bayonet. If you can find a bayonet for an SVT-40, buy it because they're virtually non-existent. Comes with a 6-slotted tube flash eliminator and muzzle brake. The only thing they changed on this was they made it into a 2-slot later. They have deemed the SVT-40 as one of the most complicated pieces of armament the Russians ever came up with. I've taken this thing apart many times, always take it apart after using it, cleaning it. The bastards were right. It is one complicated piece of equipment to strip down. I believe it comes into 17 different parts to field strip this thing. They're very accurate weapon, and cleaned properly, very reliable. The only thing that would make this more valuable would be if it had a swastika captured on from indicating it was captured by Germans, because Germans loved these things. They loved to capture them. Or a large A, which means a captured Russian weapon by Finland. And it's the only thing that would make it even more valuable. This breech action, bolt carrier here, was more of a dull, shiny colored. After 1943, they were refurbed, basically cleaned up, ones that they pulled out of combat, ones that they had survived, and it's more of a plum-colored appearance to them now. All matching serial numbers, rated up to 1,500 yards, or 1,500 meters for its accuracy. Semi-automatic, locks back, few things special about the SVT. There's a little lever here. It falls in out of place so it doesn't get hit accidentally. Flips into the up position. Clicking it, out comes a magazine. 10 round box magazine. And if you note the angle that it fits into, on a very steep attack angle and then back, remained the general principle of magazine loading for the SKS all the way up to the present day AK-47. Still loads in the same manner. Now the only difference, like I said, that you can't tell from a distance, the SVT-38 to the 40. The stock on a very rare few of them actually ever changed. This is an SVT-38 stock with a 40 mechanism. Now what makes that difference? This loop right here, this is the safety. Now presently it's in the safe position. Now clicked over with your thumb, assuming you're right-handed, now it's in the firing position. But the 38 would flip all the way over into this groove, making it a fully automatic rifle. That was one of the big problems. They hadn't quite figured out how to do that properly in 1938. Heat shield guard on it. Again, one of the pieces that all has to come apart to clean it. We have a nubdual right here, which has a setting from 1 to 4. And can only be adjusted by a very special wrench that came with the rifles, and most of them are lost to history now. And what that did, if anybody's familiar with the Canadian military, we had the FN-C1A1. Russia came out with the idea first. You could adjust how much gas was allowed to go back into your operating arm. So whether you wanted to launch grenades, or by using a blank firing apparatus, or you had different loads of ammo, you could adjust how much gas you wanted to go back into it. Same as the Mosin Nagant, we have the dog collar sling. Weighs, despite it look actually rather bulky, it weighs the same as the 9130. Weight did not change. We have a Bakelite butt plate on it instead of metal. Quality wood. We have the Russian star here, and we have the armaments stamp. Again, like I said, all matching serial numbers. They were claimed at one point that they were hard to fire, hard to control in a rapid fire situation. Again, only due to lack of training. You got to remember, in 1940, when these things came out, the enemy was literally at the gates, and they had to make them as quickly as possible. Making just under 2 million of these in 1 year, they were stamping them out very fast. You do the math, how many a day were being processed out of the plants. And when you put them into service, into the hands of an unqualified shooter, they didn't tend to get the best grade, as shall we say, by the people who were nominating them. It is in actually very, very good condition. It's been in stores. Well, originally went into stores in, I believe, 1945, and so it was at least out there for 5 years. It may have not actually been in active service, but it was out there for 45 years, since 45, the year 45, and then went into storage until 2010. And then, voila, again, fall of Russia, everything's coming out of their market, and the Cold War store bunkers are all being dumped out, and they find their way into what would be their former enemies, which is supposedly us. Now the SVT-40, the Mosin Nagant, they actually, when they decided to come out with scopes, they had to drill holes in the side of the breech for that scope to mount. It was a side-mounted scope, so the scope was actually off-center of the barrel. Still very efficient system, the way the Russians had it set up. Now, with the SVT-40, they designed it with the breech mechanism has a groove in it, and there's one on each side. And the idea was, if you could ever find, well, they're not hard to find, they're just bloody expensive, there's actually a scope mount. This end plug comes out, the scope mount slides on just like a set of forks, and it locks into that hole with the scope mounted on it. So if you wanted to transport it, you could push this button, pull the entire scope and the mount off, and transport it separately. Slide it back in, it's set the same as when you took it off. This idea later came out quite popular in the 1970s for takedown sniper scopes, and the Russians came up with that idea that much before the Americans ever came out with the idea. It is loud, to say the least. Because it's gas operated, you are getting blowback from the port. Very, very little muzzle lift on it. But you are getting blowback from here, so it probably isn't, really shouldn't say it's louder. It appears to be louder because of the way that the report is being ejected. Caliber, 7.62 by 54 R, R standing for rimmed. Same as the Mosin Nagant. Hitting power, 30-06 in conversion. So the same ammo as the Mosin Nagant used, and the Russians loved that ammo, and they just basically kept it going, and they used it since the late, well, actually, we shouldn't call it the late, it was the early 1900s is when they switched it over, the same ammo that they were using in the Mosin Nagants during the First World War. Nicholas Tsar was instituting of the same ammo, and it worked its way up. Now, after this model, which, like I said, the SVT-38, at a distance you can't tell the difference. The next step up from this, 1945, was the SKS, which you've seen in the other video. And that found its way through Korea, through Vietnam, and is still very readily in the hands of our supposed terrorist enemies. And then the next step up from that was the AK-47. So until you get into the 1990s, Russia never changed. The ammo in the SKS, of course, was changed to a 7.62 by 39 instead of the 54, which, like I said, is about the hitting power of a 30-30, but very fast recycling weapon. Same sights, or I should say the sight mechanism is identical to the Mosin Nagant. Same sight adjustment system, front and back. This is a very nice gun. If you can find one in better condition, grab it. Good luck. Good luck finding these in general. Other than, it is, to say the least, it is an experience to try to tear down one of these guns and clean it properly after a shoot. It is something you almost want to go through the manual first. And that, unfortunately, was the only downfall that the Russians had when they made it. Alrighty, till next time, boys.